I just love, no. I just love Hillary Vaughn hitting Tim Cook with 4 questions that are so pertinent while she's walking. If you need to see that video, because she's literally walking down the hallway, like looking over her shoulder as he's surrounded by security guards. And I think the video is even more powerful than the audio. But these are questions that you and I have been asking for a couple of years now on this show, and certainly have been talking about the untenable nature of preaching to the American public how woke you are while bending the knee constantly to China. It is becoming increasingly impossible for American woke corporations, that is, American corporations here in the United States that are behaving in a woke fashion, to justify that behavior in the United States while also doing extensive work with China. And I want to play this audio for you. Tim Cook sat the CEO of Apple with Joe Biden at the lead table last night at the state dinner for France. Emmanuel Macron is in town, and so they were feting the French president and what may well be the first major sort of state dinner that they've had in the Biden administration. There were lots of celebrities there, but Tim Cook was set at the primary table, I am told, alongside of Joe Biden. Tim Cook was also walking the halls of the United States Capitol, and he has been in the news for 2 big reasons this week as a part of the Apple relationship. First, he went and got involved in a tiff with Elon Musk because Apple decided they were no longer going to advertise Apple products on Twitter because they didn't believe that Twitter was safe. It appears that then Elon Musk said, is Apple going to pull us off the App Store? They had some sort of meeting between the two, and that threat appears to have dried up. But more substantially
I just want to throw in there, I didn't want to interrupt your the Clay train, but the fact that even the possibility of the Disney effect for a place like Apple, I think goes to show you don't have to go to war with all these companies.
That's right.
They just have to know that war is a possibility. And Elon made it known that over this issue of the App Store, it's possible. That alone can change the way this goes.
Yeah, and we talked about that with Disney, and I think it's a good point you're raising. When the company is firing on all cylinders, they can handle taking some flack over being too woke. But Disney's business model is legitimately collapsing when you look at the cable and satellite business and the streaming services and how much money they're losing now on streaming, $8 billion, I believe, in the past year. So the threats become more paramount when the business itself isn't as structurally sound as it has been in the past. And so Apple is now finding itself in the crosshairs, not only in terms of what social media rules should apply in the United States, but more importantly on a global scale with what's going on in China and Apple's relationship with the Chinese government. And in particular, Apple is willing to do essentially whatever China tells it to do. It is terrified, Apple is, of China. Meanwhile, it is constantly, I would say, denigrating in many ways American values, attacking American institutions, even though it's technically an American corporation. So Tim Cook is making the rounds on Capitol Hill yesterday. Credit to Fox News, and I'm not sure, do we have the reporter's name here who finds Tim Cook walking the halls of Congress and begins to ask questions? Hillary Vaughn is the Fox reporter here. I wanted to make sure we gave her credit. I don't know how many of you saw this audio. The video is quite compelling because Tim Cook is just trying to avoid making eye contact with her at all. He's got a flanks of security that's surrounding him. He's clearly attempting to avoid answering any of these questions. This is in the halls of Capitol Hill, so he is engaged in political activity. It's not as if she tracked him down at some restaurant and started to berate him. This is Hillary Vaughn asking a series of very legitimate questions of Tim Cook on Capitol Hill yesterday. Listen.
Mr. Cook, do you support the Chinese people's right to protest? Do you have any reaction to the factory workers that were beaten and detained for protesting COVID lockdowns? Do you regret restricting airdrop access that protesters used to evade surveillance from the Chinese government? Do you think it's problematic to do business with the Communist Chinese Party when they suppress human rights?
I mean, he's doing, from a PR perspective, there's not answering is the best answer. I'm just going to say it. It's obvious. She's asking Hillary Vaughn the right questions, ones that a lot of people certainly would like answers to. But again, Clay, I think that we are beginning to enter a new phase here. And when you add together the Ron DeSantis Disney fight, and now obviously Disney has a new CEO, as you said, Disney's business model is in a bit of trouble. We're in rough economic waters. It feels weird right now. A lot of people are starting to say we're in a stealth recession. I think I've even said something like that before on the show or something close to it. We've talked about this for months, but it's not front page, oh my gosh, the bottom is falling out of the stock market, the housing market, that sort of recession, but something definitely is in a downturn feel right now. And some of these companies, now that Elon has bought Twitter, let's understand, there's also a much faster, much more likely communication hub for conservatives or just people in general to be able to mobilize now against one of these major tech companies, right? You can organize a boycott now much more quickly as a result of Twitter not being some left-wing propaganda mill, which is what it was in the past. So I think that the tectonic plates in corporate wokeness, it's a big look, we were defending on our own 5-yard line for the last few years. I mean, that's become obvious, but we have gained serious ground here. And there's, I think the calculation for places like Apple, now Disney, it's shifting. It doesn't mean the wokeness isn't there. It doesn't mean they're not still going to try it. But Clay, they used to be able to just trample anybody on the right with total impunity. And conservatives would all say, no, I like the products. We wouldn't do anything about it. I think that has started to change. The fact that Tim Cook has already, he's already squashed it with Elon. They're not going to do the App Store block. That's indicative of something, right? That Elon will come out and say that that's changed. So now I think it's a question of momentum and continuing to use it. I mean, because on the China issue, one of the complexities of the China issue is these companies do have a massive profit motive in being hypocritical, right? Here at home, it's all about political hypocrisy. It's all about we're woke, shut up. Even if this hurts our bottom line, we're going to do it because that's what we want to do. With China, if they speak out on principle, they do risk their bottom line as well. So it's two things coming together, right? They'll sacrifice profits here to be woke, and that's it. Abroad, they're actually going to be, if they stand up and take a principled stance, they're going to lose with China as well as not necessarily be able to have the principles in mind that they would like. What? You're looking at me like I'm a crazy man.
No. I just love Hillary Vaughn hitting Tim Cook with 4 questions that are so pertinent while she's walking. If you need to see that video, because she's literally walking down the hallway, like looking over her shoulder as he's surrounded by security guards. And I think the video is even more powerful than the audio. But these are questions that you and I have been asking for a couple of years now on this show, and certainly have been talking about the untenable nature of preaching to the American public how woke you are while bending the knee constantly to China. And to see it suddenly start to blow up in terms of but finally becoming an issue for these companies is, I think you're right, an example of, hey, we've moved the ball in some way so that we're finally getting some of these questions asked, as opposed to just yelling into the wilderness. Like I felt like
shortened
we were
version
doing
of what I was
while.
trying to say is, because I'm thinking about it, free speech is good for business in America, but they will shut it down. Standing for free speech in China is actually not good for business, right? It's different. And this is what you're seeing with Twitter. If you believe in free speech and you try to support those principles in China, the Chinese government's just going to shut you down. You're going to have to deal with big problems. In this country, free speech, Elon, no one even talks about this, Clay. That's why I'm glad more Twitter users joining faster than ever before, more interactions. He cut 80% of the staff. We've been pointing out, wow, where else could you cut 80% of the staff? Like, what federal government agencies could you cut 80% of the staff and they work just as well? So free speech is actually good for business in America. It's not good for business in China, but then it's a question of principle. That's what I was that's the difference I'm trying to indicate.
Yeah, I just think we're in a really intriguing inflection point. Now, we don't know what's going to happen with the protests in China. I mean, Buck, these are the biggest protests against the government in China since 1989. There is very little precedent for what has happened. We talked to Gordon Chang about this. I thought he was great earlier in the week. We don't know how this is going to shake out there.
I love Iran. Gordon. The Chinese Communist Party is not going to get overthrown by this. Look, Gordon knows more about this than I do by a mile, but all they do in China is figure out how to stop protest. I mean, this is literally obsession number one of the CCP. So, I mean, you're looking at a 1 in 100 shot right now.
What I think is the protest could cause, Buck, is are they finally going to abandon the COVID zero strategy? And if they do, and I want everybody out there thinking about this, remember how much we were getting lectured by the Faucis of the world about how China had handled the COVID so much better than we did? That narrative has suddenly flipped because most people in China haven't had COVID. They haven't been exposed to it. We know the COVID shots are worthless. So the only real way to get through COVID, at least based on the data right now, is for everybody to get COVID. So China for 3 years has been trying to say, oh, we're going to keep everybody from getting COVID. We're going to test. We're going to thanks to this the model that we have, it's far more superior to the democratic model. Well, the rest of the world, all democracies are essentially through COVID, by which I mean the impact of COVID. We can still have stupid decisions made like masking and everything else. China may still have to go through, Buck, a real outbreak before this is all said and done.
Remember the politicization of herd immunity as an area of discussion. We weren't allowed to talk about herd immunity. You were a grandma killer if you talked about herd immunity.
Yes.
That's what they said. But that's actually the way that humanity gets through viruses, aerosolized viruses, the kind of disease that can spread, population diseases. It is through herd immunity. That's the only way. And you can go back to ancient Greece, Sparta's siege of Athens. And there's a fantastic book that deals with this, A War Like No Other, written by Victor Davis Hanson, who you and I both think is fantastic. And that was a disease. It was a horrifically high fatality rate. They didn't even know what the disease is. You know why? Because people's immune systems shifted and, they eventually got to a point where it wasn't a problem anymore. Viruses tend to, fortunately, mutate in the direction of less lethality because of the nature of what viruses want to do. So we do have, at some level, herd immunity now. We have herd immunity to the first version of COVID. So people will still get COVID, but they're getting a lighter version. Look, I've had it twice.
Yeah.
You've had it twice, right?
Yeah, at least twice.
COVID
may have had it more than twice.
Yeah, first COVID infection, I was like, whining and feeling sorry for myself because it was so painful and rough and horrible. Second COVID infection was a joke. I mean, it was like barely a sniffle. So that's what we got going on right now, a virus that is moving. But if you're in China and your immune system has truly never been exposed to it, you might be up for COVID number one. And their vaccines are trash, as we know.
The vaccines are trash, and they also, Buck, have no major hospital infrastructure to actually be able to handle the wild numbers of elderly people who have never had this virus at all. So things can flip in a hurry, and I'm curious to see how this is going to play out. But Apple definitely under siege as a part of that relationship with China.